Something we're not doing is we're not bringing men into adulthood. There are tribes that whenever a kid turns 13, they would knock his tooth out and stick him out into the wilderness and let him learn how to be resilient by himself. And then he comes back understanding responsibility. And it's not happening. I mean, you hope that you're going to get some of that in sports, but it is up to the fathers to find ways to bring them into adulthood.
Fellas, what's going on? I hope this episode finds you well, and I hope this episode leaves you better than when it found you. Today's episode is with Dodge Feeler, and he is the founder of a telehealth medicine company, and it's kind of interesting because I sort of shit on that industry throughout the whole interview, but he is someone who I think stands out among the industry because we don't really talk about the science aspect of things very much. We talk about heart and soul and spirit and all the reasons why those things are important for a guy, a father, a man, husband, partner, whatever it is, that whatever role that they're filling, how that actually supports and aids. And it's a great conversation, a good one that I'm looking forward to you enjoying. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode with Dodge Feeler. Dodge, welcome to the Modern Masculinity Podcast, man. It's great to have you here.
Hey, Hector, thank you for having me here. I truly appreciate getting to spend time with you and see where this conversation goes.
It's always funny that the listeners don't get to see the mad dash that happens before the recording, actually, because there's sometimes where that's the some of the best content doesn't get recorded, and so I try and hit the recording button as early as I can, and then also there's just shit that gets in the way. But I'd love to throw it to you. Maybe it's that, maybe it's not. But what's real in your world? What's bubbling up, or what is consuming a lot of Dodge right now?
I'd say probably the biggest thing consistently taking up my time, which is something I've chosen to do, and that's parenthood. I spend my time with my family, and then obviously my business is a close second there as I build it and create something that I feel called to bring into the world.
Yeah. It is such a different world that we live in. I look at my life so different from my friends who are single with no kids. Because I'm like, we can't even, I think we said in our previous phone call, our brains are not even the same. I can understand you, but that was a previous me that frankly had to die in order for this person to continue to live. And then even for my friends who are married and either thinking about getting kids, or I have a friend that's having their first one, and I'm like, okay, there's kind of sort of ladders on the rung of manhood is sort of how on the show we've come to talk about it. And it's so true that life is so different at each rung that it's really hard and maybe you can relate up, but I don't know that you can really understand until you're sort of in the throes of whatever that is.
I completely agree. I was actually previously married for 10 years with no kids. And then obviously I spent plenty of time single as well. And my sister, her oldest daughter is 16, and I have a 7-month-old about to turn 8 months. And she'd always say, you just don't get it. You don't understand it. I would kind of get upset or triggered, or it would bother me. And then I go through it all, to start parenthood, I met my current wife, and her child was 3 at the time. And I immediately just recognized the need for me to go all in this relationship. And my brain changed, what's important changed. That drive to be so successful and all that mattered as a business and how you make money, it quickly shifted. And even during that time when I met her, I had gotten into some psychedelics, and I'd started kind of playing around the spiritual marketplace. And I thought that was it. I was on my way to enlightenment, which at this place that I'm at now, I'm not convinced there is any enlightenment other than the basic realization that we are, in the image of God, or as I like to refer to it as the divine spark. And while I still like to kind of play off in consciousness a little bit, I'm really spending most of my time of how do I bring my vision down here to earth, and the struggles and the tough things that come along with that. And how do you work through that stuff without grinding your life away and then actually enjoying the one chance you get to be here?
Yeah, I remember in my 20s sort of going on this personal development, which was sort of wrapped. I think my white knight syndrome wanted to make it about personal development, but it was about making more money. It was at the root of it. That motivation was how do I get better as a person so I can make more money, and climb that mountain. I've talked a lot about it on the show, but climb that mountain and realize that oh shit, this is not the summit I thought I wanted to climb. I'm I've made more money than, like, all those sort of things, and I was just the bottom of happiness, right? It really made me realize that I did all of the things I said I wanted to do, by like 24, 25, and it was like I'm not even an inch closer to feeling how I thought that I would feel when I got here. And so then I was like, okay, I realized, like, all right, so let's climb another mountain. And I think the challenge was, I thought I had going up that, that summit, which was the parenting and the relationships and the white picket fence and the, happily ever after American dream, whatever that is. It was like, as I was on the way up, I thought again, this is it. This is the mountain. This is the one that I'm going to climb. And then I'm going to get to the top and plant my flag and set up my chair and, like, whatever it is, right? Like, I had just this idea of, like, there's going to be a time where, like, eternal bliss, is sort of reached. And then at, like, the moment I realized, I distinctly remember, like, walking out on my grass probably a few months before my relationship just really started to crumble, at least externally. Like, there were a lot of internal signs and it was a lot of pointing to it. But I remember thinking, like, wow, I've got it. Like, I've got it all. Right? The beautiful wife at the time, the great kids, the nice house, the wonderful community, like, all of the things. And I'm like, and maybe I had an inkling, but I was like, something is off. This is not, like, also I realized that it was like, even that felt hollow. Even that, I was like, I've got this. And still, there was something it, like, didn't feel how I thought it was supposed to feel. And so the universe coming along said, no problem. We'll take care of that. we'll kick you down the mountain and give you another summit to climb. And so now, to your point, it's like, I think it is an endless amount of summits, and it's like, it's about enjoying the one that you're on, right? No, like, with all that comes along with it, knowing that it's here for a time, all of those things. But how can we get to the place where we both understand that this is a summit and that this is a moment, and it's like living in between those two worlds? I think, to your point, is the dance of life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I love that you're using mountains. I'm actually in the process of working with my wife for me to get to go to the mountains by myself, because that's often much like Jesus went to his own deserts or wherever he was at to regulate. It's also kind of just a chance to rewrite or write the next saga of your script. I love peak summits. I love the blissful states, but you have to know it's not going to stay. It's always going to change. And I thought I was at the peak summit. It wasn't going to change. Which is hilarious because, I'm 32, 33 years old. I have a home on the river where I just enjoyed my weekends drinking. I was a hair restoration surgeon, and I thought I was at the peak of my career and that was it. I was almost thinking of myself as sort of just not retired, but just I'm set for life at 33 years old, which is hilarious. And then kind of similar, just that feeling. I started having this strange feeling. I would notice it when I would do like some mushrooms or just spend time with myself before I really started looking deeper. And I was like, what is that? What is that feeling? And I was like, oh, that's me feeling uncomfortable. And I'm way too comfortable right now. And much like you said, the universe sort of just said, yeah, it's time to go ahead and follow the soul's calling, which I'm still very much on the ride. There's a lot of things that are very much in alignment in my life. And then there's a lot of things that I can feel that there is more change coming, and just learning how to embrace that. And after kind of sort of restarting my life, wrecking it to an extent, now it's how do you follow your calling without going into detriment?
Yeah. I think that is right. There's the hero's journey, right? Like, it's this classic thing that I think it's easy in practice to be like, yeah, I'm gonna take that journey. But when you're in the middle of it, like, that is the journey. It's like a humbling experience, right? Like, out of that whole journey. And are you familiar with the hero's journey and that sort of process?
Yes, I've spent some time kind of writing my own and looking into it.
So for the listeners, it's, sort of the basic arc of every sort of story, from Lord of the Rings to, Star Wars, right? Like, all these classic examples, Lion King, right? Like, crazy things happen. The guy goes out into the forest, finds some help. Timon and Pumbaa come along, right? Like, he finds himself, right? Like all these things happen, and then at the end, there's this great, celebration. And I think people get caught on that celebration, but that's like 30 seconds of the movie, right? Shit is crazy for the entire movie. And then the large percentage of it is actually the journey. And I think people get that flipped, right? Because we're so used to, like, watching movies and walking out and remembering, like, oh yeah, it was, it was the final win. It was like the saving goal, right? My kids and I are watching Rookie of the Year a lot, which is, like, great because my son's really into baseball. And it's like, it's such a fun, it's a great movie, right? There's a few instances where I'm like, ah, you know, like 90s kids humor. Like I can't believe they were, having kids talk about how the girls were stacked. It was like, and I'm like, all right. But other than that, like the morals and the themes that really emerge from it are so huge. But again, it's like it's hard. Oh, it's great. And then it's hard. It's hard. Like and to not be okay with that hardness, I think just sets up the massive majority of people and guys alike for just huge amounts of frustration, failure, like whatever. But if we're not expecting things to be challenging, I just think we're up for like a rude awakening.
I think the other end of that is if we're just living on that mountain peak indefinitely, we're going to get bored. We're going to figure out how to self sabotage ourselves. And that is as much as I love, I don't know why The Little Mermaid is the only thing that's coming to me, but any of those fairy tale movies that you see on Disney, the thing that I often notice is you see that happily ever after comes through. But you have to know after they're married and they have the kids, there's going to be more than one dark night of the soul that comes along the way. And that doesn't mean that there's not a place for the storytelling that ends with that high summit, but there's going to be another saga that comes in. There's going to be more pilgrimages that you have to go on as, whether you want to call it climbing the ladder. I often see a lot of, there's a lot of speculation like we're not really doing a ladder, we're actually doing a circle, the circle of life, as you mentioned earlier. But it's not gonna go away if you choose to keep embracing growth and expansion and living your life to the fullest.
Right, right. And I think we sort of talked about it pre-call. The habit that I got into, early in this journey, personal development journey, even sort of the spiritual side. When I had kids, I found God. When I got divorced, we got close. Is sort of how that worked out. And I think along that journey, there's just so many moments to get caught up in doing the ritual or doing the habit or doing the meditation or doing the breath work and then sort of pretending that that is the actual work when thinking like that's and it is work and it is hard and it is challenging and that it is and also there becomes a point where okay, you're doing that. Now the real lifting, the real work, the real exercise is to go out and live that, to go out and bring that into your life to where there is no separation between those moments and your living, because ultimately you're going to continue to get tested. And so if you don't sort of, like I found myself running into these situations where intellectually I'm able to see and like I kind of step outside and go like, here are the ideal set of actions that you should be doing and I could lay them out and articulate them very clearly, but the player me was still caught in whatever bullshit that I was caught up in. And so there was like a disconnect between what I knew and what I was doing. And I think that at least I have to go through that phase where I can see it first. But there was a phase where it was like, okay, dude, like you've done all the meditations you need to do. Like this is not a go and pray about it problem. This is a go and fucking do something about it problem.
Yeah, get something done. No, I think it's so true. It's great to find ways to find your center. You mentioned breath work. I remember the first time I did holotropic breath work and I worked through things. I realized I needed to become my own best friend. And I came out of it like, I figured it out. It's all figured out. And then you go back into the real world and again, you get punched in the face. I don't think most of us realize that we don't necessarily have to truly suffer. We still have to work through the struggles. There's definitely a place for prayer, but then it's you made the prayer, so watch for the answers to come. Don't miss. There's that phrase where it's talking about. I was praying for you. Like, where'd you go? And God's like, I sent you boats, I sent you trains, I sent you helicopters. You missed all of them, and I'll find myself when I'm in a place of struggle. I'll say, okay, what am I missing here? And that is sometimes a good time, I think, to kind of get a broader perspective. And again, now that I think if we've done the work, we no longer need to wait on a near death experience or some other kind of wild experience to wake us up. It's okay, we've done it. We're self aware of our patterns now. We've seen, what little triggers we have from some trauma or whatever we work through or get to work through childhood. And once you realize that, again, it's kind of coming back. Okay, I don't need my life to go to detriment to come back to that place to find my calling again. It's more go take a breath somewhere, see it, and then go back into the stress and learn how to take a deep breath during the stress.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments, and I've talked about it quite a number of times on this show, but I think it's worth mentioning, is like I was my ex and I were really going through it, and I was about to see her, and I didn't know it at the time, but I knew there was some things that there was some shenanigans. Like I knew that the relationship was not whole and in integrity, from almost like a spiritual sort of knowing. And so on the drive to wherever we're going to meet my kid's mom, my kids are in the car, and I'm full on in like a almost a hot, like not hot chopping because I know it's not good while you're driving, but I'm in full breath work mode. And my son, he goes, "Dad, are you breathing?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "All right." And he just keeps on going and doing what he's doing. And I'm, it for sure. It's objectively weird, right? And I'm okay with that. And also, I love that he now, we're now, that's 2 3 years we're sort of removed from that. I see him in moments where he needs to regulate. He's taking his deep breaths and he's doing it, and it's just such a normal thing for him, and for us to just to be able to regulate. Like yesterday, my daughter, she's freaking out. She can't read the sign on the picture. She's like, sounding out words and stuff like that. But she's just having a full meltdown, and she's going, "I can't read." And I'm like, "That's fine. We'll work on reading. You need to get centered. Like, you are so far from being anywhere where you can learn anything, that just the ability and practice to, like you said, to take that breath and to do it in the moments that we need it, as opposed to it just relegating to that 15 minutes a day or that 10-minute whatever when we hop on our app, right? But if we can actually integrate that into our life, I think people, guys, all will see like some, like in no short terms, like miracles, frankly.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love that you use miracles. Some of my affirmations these days are I am receiving miracles, I'm witnessing miracles, and I'll go on and on with it. But even just you teaching your children how to regulate, that's the gift of a healed man, right? As my son, those first few months are brutal, and he's only going to be as regulated as I am. So my wife's exhausted, and I'm doing my best to put him to sleep. And I'm going back to the things that I've been practicing. I'm taking deep breaths. I'm doing a lot of humming. I'm singing. And even to this day, when he's having a tough time going to sleep or just upset, I know some of those practices to do. And then even my daughter, whenever she's hurting herself, I'll say, okay, I know that you're hurting. Let's just take a minute, and I'll just start walking through some breathing with her. And every single time she calms down, we're able to take care of the wound. And again, that's the work. That's the children, as you said, that's where you see God the most.
I saw a post recently, and it was really interesting because it was one of the times, and I've been doing this more a lot, and I don't know how I feel about it, but I'm just in the middle of this experiment where I have a full reply written up to this ex user who I have no ever connection with at all, but I've got a paragraph written up, and I go, yeah, I'm just going to hit cancel on that one. We're just going to move on with it with our day. But it said, men are more emotional than women. And it was like, it was some doctor, or I don't remember what it was. It was something where I was like, what I came away from it was going, okay, maybe there is something there. And as I sort of continue to reflect on it, I don't know that if men are more emotional or whatever, in the context that they were using it, I think that men are more emotionally impactful in the sense that a man's ability to regulate his nervous system doesn't just impact him, but it also impacts everybody in his orbit. And so our ability to actually regulate ourselves, I mean, they've seen the science of, I think it's like kids regulate with their parents up to like 7 years old or something like that, and they can sort of scientifically prove that. And I would imagine that, like, as woo-woo as you get, that there's something going on when someone is regulated, right? There is a calming presence, even if it's just energetically or fate, like however, woo-woo or not you want to get. My point is that if guys can see that their ability to regulate themselves in these moments actually extends beyond just them, perhaps there's an extra reason to do that, right? Why am I going to go do breath work? I don't need breath work. My life is fine. Like whatever. Okay, you can say all that, and is there actually, an opportunity to, a lot of the guys that might listen to the show are looking for like optimization or looking to, be their best. Well, like, is there a way for you to start making an impact there? I think not enough guys are seeing the connection between their breath work or their meditation, or I've been doing some like Taoist qigong, sort of like those things, because I'm like, I'll try whatever. Like, these people have been doing this for millennia. Like, there's got to be, I'll try whatever. And so whatever that your practice is, finding that and realizing that it's not it's not just siloed to that area of your life or that part of your life, but it actually can bleed into others, and bleed's a weird word, but it actually impact others and the people around it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting where people do even feel that like almost collectively where you're at, which can definitely be viewed as woo. But there's also, I'm not going to be an expert here, but there is a lot of neuroscience in improving that your nervous system is going to bring in that perception of what's happening outside, what's happening inside, and the others are going to feel that. And I think you know who Preston Smiles is in the Bridge, the program that he runs.
Yeah, we just interviewed him on one of, oh, Jason, yeah, Jason, who actually connected us. We got a chance to go out and record an episode with Preston.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of my. I look to him. He's a great mentor. His wife is incredible too. And I was doing the bridge, and the way the bridge works is usually you're going to be going through something that you get to work through. Is they're not actually waterboarding you, but they're putting you through all kinds of crazy different exercises. And I was bringing not great weather, and everyone around me could feel it. And finally, Alexi, his wife, called me out about it. She said, "You know, you carry your weather and it impacts people the way Preston does," which was not necessarily a compliment, but she's like, you need to bring out the sunshine. And it really pointed that out to me. That was one of the first times I realized that whatever I'm bringing to the table, those surrounding me are going to be impacted as well. And yeah, he's learning how to control your own weather. And that's, again, I like qigong and all those different practices. That they do not resonate with me quite as the same as my biggest connector is going into nature, bare feet in the dirt, sunrises, sunsets, and usually doing some sort of breathing or singing or anything like that. But my wife knows, she knows that that's something that I'm going to need. So at some point, I'm like, I need to go outside for a little bit. Or after I finish my work for the day, I do my best to not immediately go and start taking care of kids. I do something, whether I sit in my office for a few minutes or again, I'll just go outside. I come back and I'm anew. I'm able to regulate myself so that I can be regulated for them.
It seems like there's a, and you, I don't think you can fully understand where people are from following social media, but I think it sort of puts the big buckets, right? You've got these hyper masculine steroids, GLPs. Uh, I mean, I think this just this past week it came out that Brian Johnson, the guy who is spending millions of dollars to make his health life longer and live forever, essentially, like it just came out that he has some autoimmune or some stomach, like some disease, basically sickness or disease, that all the tests in the world, all the thing, like it didn't end up catching. And it's just interesting because it's like only recently is he starting to look into things like psychedelics or look into these, the sort of spiritual side of this whole equation. And I'm just wondering if enough guys are, you know, because I think there's that world where everything is measurable and everything is science and it's all physicality, and if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist, like that sort of thing, that results in a peptide crazed sort of world, which I know that there are some places, and we've talked about the positive uses of it. I just think it's also emblematic of a society that goes, well, I can just take the easy way out, and then let me take this pill or let me just inject this thing and I'll get where I want to be. And it's almost like a fast track to what I had talked about before, where they get to that place and now all of a sudden they probably realize that they're not as happy, they're not whatever, they're not fulfilled, they're not, like, that getting that didn't actually get them what they wanted. And I could see that like leading to its own crises. And so again, it's like, are enough guys waking up to something like these practices, and how not to just do them, because we talk a lot about doing them, but now it's like living them and integrating them and bringing them into your parenting or your relationships, or how you're showing up at in your world.
What you just said kind of reminds me of what I mean, I'm not the only person who says this, but the ceremony is not actually the most important part. It is the integration. And I would say I was the person. I mean, I've taken supplements and used peptides, and I was on testosterone therapy for years. On the outside, I looked fantastic. I look at the photos now, and I don't think I needed to be 240. Now I'm closer to 200 pounds, but I wasn't paying any attention to what is behind the surface, what's going on underneath there. And I'm not here to say what Brian Johnson's doing wrong, what he's doing right. I have a cabinet full of supplements, but there are a lot of days that I'm like, I'm not doing these today. Or I'll use peptide stacks because I do want to live for a long time. But I saw another post where he went through Brian Johnson's entire documentary and he found where he mentioned some trauma. It sounds like he hasn't really processed it. I'm not here to tell him what he's done and not done. But there's also a very massive level of neurosis that comes when you have, dozens of doctors following every single thing, and you're doing every procedure that comes along. And there comes a point that you kind of start bringing some of that stuff on yourself because you're so obsessed with the outward looking appearance, living for as long as possible. You're missing the entire present moment.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I, again, should do peptides and all these sort of things have benefit? Like, absolutely, for sure. But I think it's to your point about the ceremony. If someone is doing those things without purpose, without spirit, without soul, then again, it's like going through a ceremony just thinking that the ceremony is the answer, or even like for me, I've talked endlessly here, the listeners are getting their bingo cards coming out because I'm, bringing up my Catholic upbringing. But that was sort of the problem that I found, was that by the end of it, I had gone through the motions so many times, and I could tell you all of the when to sit up and when to kneel and when to whatever and yada 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 yada, and there was no soul behind it. There was no heart, and it lacked all of that. And so it took me, having a kid, and took me all these things to sort of come back and go, oh, it's not that the rituals were empty. It's not that these sort of things were void of any meaning or substance. It's that the substance was just lacking. I wasn't providing the substance into the container for lots of reasons. I think there's sort of a systemic reason, or that's just culturally, like, it's the norm to not bring substance to those things. And maybe that's by accident, maybe it's not. But to your point, it's like if we can bring some intention to the things that we're doing, I think that we're not only going to see better results, but more importantly, we're going to just have a greater sense of peace that I think is what we're chasing ultimately anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was raised in the Christian church myself. And unfortunately, I got to a point where I was going to make it no matter what, whether I was hungover or not feeling my best. I'd go through the motions. I couldn't tell you a single thing that they had said during the sermon. But again, it took me walking away and spending some time and going through a crazy place of the spiritual marketplace where I found a lot of God. And I have faith that I never could have imagined through going through those things. And now when I'm praying, it's a completely different way of praying. It's a conversation with God. It's, again, a lot of it just has to be with the present moment. And what are you doing it for? Intentionality, like you said. 30 ayahuasca ceremonies are not going to get you there. Chasing the next trip's not going to get you there. I do think there's a great place for some novelty and doing things just to see what's come up over the last few years that I have not actually taken a look at in a while. But it's really just learning how to live your life in the mundane and staying spiritual in a knowing place during that time.
You've said a term that I haven't heard before, and that's spiritual marketplace. What is that? Is that a term that you coined, or is there an actual? Does that actually mean something to What is it? Just tell the listeners what you mean by that.
I did not make that term. The first time I ever heard it was a coach I was working with. His name was Rafe Beeson, and he's someone who, it's going to every single course. It's trying all the different types of meditation, Kundalini, and I mentioned Tantra earlier, and just dabbling in every single thing, thinking you're going to find it. You're going to find the enlightenment. And I was in Austin at the time, which I don't know if you've ever been there, but I mean, It is just full of coaches and spiritual leaders that all have the answers for you. But really, what I found in all of that was most of the answers are inside of you. Even when you do a psychedelic, you're not something outside of you is not bringing that realization to you. It's you're taking the time and you're throwing yourself off default mode network and your ego long enough to find out what's actually waiting for you underneath all of it.
Yeah, it's I love what you said in the sense that it can bring up, it can highlight things. It's a tool, right? It's not the panacea. It is a tool. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, they go, and it can be easy. To your point, there are so many people that will sort of help you down this road, or they'll say they'll help you, right? And then there are so many modalities. And I think that is great, because I think the modalities arise because there isn't a one size fits all thing. And so I think that there is a place for sampling and trying and figuring out what works for you. And also I think with that comes a non-judgment or an acceptance that Yeah, I used to think, oh, this doesn't work. When no, dude, it's like it doesn't work for you. That's all, right? And as opposed to casting judgment or losing what I actually internalized, it was like, oh, I can't do it. I'm not capable of it because this particular modality did not work for me. And so I would sort of cast judgment on myself because of it. And I've sort of gotten past enough of that to be willing to try enough things. And I sort of have fallen in love with being a newbie at something because I know that, like, at least for me, I'm gonna have to try a few different things before, like, my neuroticism, my weirdo, like, I'm gonna need to find something that's a little off of the beaten path to really work for me. And I think that in doing that, it's exposed me to a lot of different things that people are not. I find I'm just like 2 or 3 years ahead of the curve, what it is, right? I was on a bulletproof coffee in 2000. I think I started drinking in 2009, 2010, something like that. And it was like people were like, "What? You put butter in your coffee?" They're like, "What?" It was the craziest thing. And now, it's on most street corners in Austin and in LA. So, what else? What other modalities though in that marketplace? I think that I don't know that I've talked about it with a certain neutrality, but I want to at least highlight that there are great things out there for people, very helpful stuff. Things. Are there things that you are excited about or that are working for you right now? Or I don't like to venture into the recommend sort of world because, like, again, people are all different, but are there things that are, fit that sort of category for you right now?
Yeah, I did want to kind of preface with I'm not even saying that the things that I tried didn't work. A lot of the things I tried during the time, they gave me insight. They gave me, some peak experiences. I just had to kind of find what worked with me because obviously you can't do all of them. You can't do Reiki and Qigong and every type of yoga there is. You kind of have to find some things that really work for you. Yoga was actually profound for me during the time. It's a little hard to fit into my current schedule, and I've been repairing my knee for about a year, and so some of the movements I can't even do. But I really think most of it is finding what brings you to center the best. And my current place, I'm keeping it a little more simple. I'm very open to trying different things, but it's for me at this time, it's really finding the spirituality in the mundane, finding ways to get outside, spending time with nature. I do a lot of breath work. I'm not going for those holotropic peak experiences. It's learning how to just stay regulated with where I'm at. And that definitely doesn't mean I'm not going to try some of the other ones again or even go back to, again, like Kundalini yoga. I had just some very wild experiences. I played around with like Akashic records. I think most of them can work in some way or another, but it's I definitely being curious enough to try some of them, but then finding, what's really going to align the best with you and even your schedule. You're, as we talked about, like you have a 6 and a 7-year-old. So you don't necessarily have time to go meditate for 6 to 8 hours a day. Or, in Austin, there's tons of every Friday you can go do ecstatic dancing, which is also fantastic. I've really enjoyed doing that. But there comes to a point where you have to spend more time with your kids than you can go do work on yourself. So you have to find what's going to work the best for you.
Yeah, that is my schedule. My kids were like, "Hey, Dad, why don't you do jujitsu anymore?" And it's like, well, actually, all their classes were at pickup time, so I had to find a different way to work out. Like,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and
exactly,
and I and
exactly.
I also have to be very mindful of, like, I think there was a little bit of resentment at the beginning of like, oh, I don't get to do this, but that's also because I was not utilizing the time. Like, I was just being bitter while I was with them instead of being present and being fun and being. Um, I think that this is another thing I'm realizing, and it's interesting as you're sort of starting this journey, that the willingness to be a good parent today is like that is a it's a sort of it's a commitment, right? In a that a different that previous generations, one generation being a good parent was providing financially. Okay, great, cool. The next step was like, okay, then beyond financially, it was like, the parents of the sort of 90s 2000s, my generation, maybe it was the 80s, but less so. It was like, okay, we got you in sports and we got you in activities, and because we're providing for you, you have food on the table, and you're involved in activities, we're a good parent. That was still like what's the word I'm looking for? It still didn't involve a lot of like actual presence or responsibility, or excuse me, responsibility, a lot of presence and a lot of like engagement, right? And so today, those things are important. It's important for them to be, provided for and for them to be involved and all that sort of stuff. But now there's a level of like presence and interaction and quality time that is it require? I don't know. It's where I'm like on the line because I see parents who do it the old style and I find myself feeling bad for the kid. And I don't know if that's the right feeling, but there's a distinct, there's parents who show up to the park. And I see this with my mom when she does it, right? Because she expects to take the kids to the park and just the kids go and play and they're on their own. When I take the kids to the park, I know that I'm going to have to be involved and engaged and I might have to like I'm going to have to do some monkey bars a little bit. I'm going to I might be able to get into the place where they find a group of friends and now they're on their own. But all the majority of the time, I'm involved for a majority of the time. And that, again, I don't know if it's a requirement, but I see the difference that it makes. And so I'm like, that now at least is my standard. And I'm hoping that more guys are willing to raise that standard, knowing that like I'm so much more tapped out at the end of the day. Like I have such a smart like if and it requires so much more quote unquote self care or silence, like whatever it is that without doing, I can't do one without the other. I can't be the present, engaged sort of person and not go out and meditate and breath work and work on myself and that sort of thing. So they're not mutually exclusive. I don't know what that word is, right? But they are connected.
We were talking about it, I'm thinking about I was at the pool with my son and my wife on Sunday, and I was witnessing this guy who he did at least bring his daughter to the swimming pool, but she very clearly wanted his attention. He gave her some toys, he gave her the floaty, but he was seriously doing this the whole time, just scrolling on his computer. And I mean, I catch myself now with my son. I'll be just changing a song, and he feels it. He'll be playing, and I grab my screen, and he's looking over me like, "What the heck? What are you doing?" And I'm like, "You're right, actually. I am gonna switch this song." But then I put my phone. Sometimes I put it far away from me because they feel it, and that's part of. Yes, I think sports are important. You want them to, be able to commit to something and go through it, but ultimately right now you're trying to teach them to not need you, and what they actually need is you. That's it. It's playing with them, and yeah, if they find some friends to go play at the park, sure. But when I go with my daughter to the park, there's not a chance that I am not going to be playing with her until she doesn't need me, which that does happen now because she's 6 and she has a ton of friends.
Yeah. It's also funny. I remember early on telling my kid's mom, I was like, they're so boring. They just sit there. And I was like kind of like frustrated, right? Because I had some friends that their kids were in the age that I'm in and they're playing catch. And the challenging part though is that it doesn't happen overnight for a guy to be able to just flip that switch and be able to go into like and to actually be fun dad present mode, right? Like I think that's a muscle that needs to be built. And the same thing like that relationship, it's I don't know, but at least for me, I know that I've built in this relationship over time so that now we're at a place where when I parent or when I discipline or whatever, there is I don't know, an understanding, a bond, like there's a real love as opposed to just previous generations where it was almost like this. And again, the parents were there, but there was no real connection. So when they tried to discipline, it was like, fuck you. Like, you don't actually know me. You don't understand me. You don't, as opposed to at least what's happening or what I'm trying to create now with my kids is like, we are all, we're together. And it's those moments at the park. It's the moments playing catch. It's the moments, even just yesterday, I was, hanging outside. We were regulating outside with my daughter and ended up us, looking at the plants and the flowers. But like those small present moments that allow for us to discipline whatever, afterwards.
No, I totally agree. My daughter, who has a great dad, but I still refer to her as my daughter because I'm not going to say stepdaughter every single time. But I got her at 3, and she didn't trust me because a lot of things had happened. And funny enough, at 6, we are way closer than we were back then. And even when my son came in, obviously I deeply loved him. I had prayed for him to come, and up until the point of my wife becoming pregnant, I loved him. But now at 7 months, I am way deeper in love with him than I was way before that. And I was a little different just because I told myself this story that I should not have children. And then going through divorce and everything, I realized there's actually nothing more than I wanted than children. And so I'm consistently like when my son wakes up in the middle of the night and I'm just so tired, but I get to rock him back to sleep. I'm actually praying like, please let me remember this moment, because I know a decade down the road or farther, like he's not going to need me for these things. It's even created a better relationship with my own father, because a dad is usually your first bully, whether they actually are or not. And he was not truly a bully. He's one of the kindest men I know. But now he's about to be 78, and where he used to want to play another round of golf, and I'm like, no, I'm ready to go. Now I'm like, can we please play another round of golf? Can we please spend a little more time with each other? And it's also just sort of, calling in. Like I'm hoping my son wants to continue to do that for me. And something else just kind of came up that I realized is the magic comes back because of your children. Spending time with them, playing in, imagination, that brings everything back to you, because we forget how to play as we get older. Everything becomes like you've talked about, just chasing money, chasing success. When I listen to my 80-year-old self who says like, you're not going to actually care about any of that. You're going to be thinking, looking around like, did I build community here? And then what impact did I make on my children? Are they going to want to be with me on my deathbed and actually tell me goodbye? That's definitely what I'm working towards.
Yeah. It's interesting that I wonder if someone were to at least like read the transcripts of this show, it would like read like a horror story of fatherhood. Because a lot of this show is just mostly therapy for me and the guests, and it can it can become that, and also I think it has to be like it has become the single greatest joy that I've been able to ever be a part of, and I can't imagine anything ever coming close. Like I even wonder, and it's like that thing, like how can you never love another kid, again, or like the same way. And I'm sure like that the people who have a huge family, or we had a guest on that had like 12 kids, and yeah, I'm sure they get through that. But again, it's like all that to say, despite all of this, I think that's what guys need, is something like hard and worthwhile, right? Like, and I think a lot of guys get upset. One other thing that came up this past week, we're recording this the week after 4th of July, and not too far from actually where we were celebrating. We were actually in the area for a period of time in Newport Beach. I don't know if you saw that, but it got shut down with, there was rioters, and they were attacking the police horses, and they were shooting fireworks into the crowd. And it got to the point where the police or the sheriff's county or whatever, they shut down the whole like city. So all of those businesses that were expecting a big night, there was not a single bar open on, it's called the Peninsula, which is a huge strip of land. And, tons, dozens, maybe hundreds of businesses that suffered because of it, whether they didn't actually get business or there was so much looting. And it's not to take away from that, right? It's not to take away from their own responsibility, for sure. But that is like the emblem of a society that, or men, because a lot of the destruction was being caused by men, guys, 18, teenage 20-something-year-old kids, boys, whatever, who were clearly not excited about their future. Like if they were thinking about being a future dad, if that was in their mindset, or they were working, like you said, they were working towards something, they would be so far from doing those things. But I think like there's this mass sort of, psychosis happening where we've gotten so far from what actually matters that people literally do not give a fuck. And it's crazy to see.
Kids bring purpose, right? And unfortunately, I do love America for what it is. I have my issues with it, as most people do. But something we're not doing is we're not bringing men into adulthood. There are tribes that whenever a kid turns 13, they would knock his tooth out and stick him out into the wilderness and let him learn how to be resilient by himself. And then he comes back understanding responsibility. And it's not happening. I mean, you hope that you're going to get some of that in sports, but it is up to the fathers to find ways to bring them into adulthood. A lot of it comes down to mother wounds, father wounds. But again, like one of my biggest jobs that I'll get to do as my son gets older, and right now I'm not going to be able to do it, but it is actually to take that son from the teat. It's actually to show him how to be a man and not go around looking for the whole world to mother him.
And we could do we have done whole episodes on this, but that's I think a big challenge that a lot of men of our generation have, is that we didn't, there are of course some examples of them, but as a whole we did not see strong fathering. We did not see, strong leader. And I was actually, a lot of it was strong mothering, right? It was moms trying to be dads are trying to raise men in their image, which is, we've talked a lot about it, as like my viewers or listeners are getting their bingo card, is like we've talked about the damage that can sort of create when a mom is raising a boy to be what she thinks a man should be. Like that's, is sort of challenging and hard. But then now we as fathers, we now have this, I look at it as responsibility to, like you said, take our sons from the teat and turn them into fathers. And we are doing that. I don't know if blind is the right word, but a lot of us didn't have that done in a right or a structured or a foundational way. And so we're sort of grabbing in the dark, grabbing in a dark room, trying to find our way. And I think we're making good strides, but I think that is still a challenge that we have to sort of confront head on, is that the way that I love my dad. He's been a great, dad in his ways. And I think that he was also robbed of a lot of his power, if you will, as a father, because societally it was not, we tried to like declaw boys, we tried to like defang them, and take out all of the masculinity. And it was almost like if a dad wanted to bring in more masculinity, he was ridiculed, frankly. And so, or he was sort of this gunslinging, woman beater sort of thing, right? And I think obviously there's a balance and a middle, but I think that it's sort of up to fathers of our generation to move it closer towards that way.
My dad did the very best he could. I mean, he did a lot to help me become a man. I don't spend a lot of time analyzing what he did wrong. I've mentioned this more than once, but I don't know if it'll come up where people see it twice. But I went through this journey where I kind of looked at all the really amazing men in my life that had mentored me, and I found things that I did not want of myself. And I realized there is no actual roadmap to the man I want to become. And it really took me getting into my 30s and going through some real stuff to realize I have to become that man. That is my biggest responsibility, is to become a man that I can be proud of and that my son can be proud of. And pride may not be the best word, but being someone that society and humanity is bettered for by the time I leave this earth.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Dodge, this has been such a fun conversation. I'm excited and looking forward to round 2 already. Is there anything that we didn't talk about today or we didn't touch on today that you still feel is worth mentioning?
We really covered a lot. I know we're probably coming close to the end. One thing that you and I both talked a little bit about is just what it takes to be a partner, which I don't know. Do you date much these days? Or are you too deep into fatherhood to be able to have time for that?
There was a period and I've talked about it on the show, where I came out of the divorce and the split, just like that was all I could think about. And that was all that was driving me. And I was like, this is not healthy. And so since that time, I've not re-engaged with it in sort of any serious way. But there will be a time and place. And my daughter's like, she's starting to ask, like, Dad, do you have a girlfriend? She's asking it more and more. So I'm like, geez, what are you saying here? I'm like, you're the most important girl in my life right now. Let's enjoy it.
That is the most important thing. I was curious more just because another role that's often taught is we're supposed to hold all the space for women. We're supposed to a default even just listen and hear them over and over again and just supply all their needs. Something that I've realized is you do need to do that, but you have to have the boundaries to be able to say, I need a little space. I've given all I can give, and even just help them see their own BS. Again, that's kind of going off the path, but that's one thing you and I chatted a little bit about beforehand. And I think it's amazing that you're doing all the work you're doing. And, you can even like write out a little bit of a description of what you could see in a woman that would be, a great co-parent for you. And again, I'm not here to give you advice. It's just sort of something that has come through in my own path. And I would say most people looking at the way I did things would probably say it was not very smart, because I was doing a lot of work, but I very abruptly went from single man, looking at all my stuff, doing it all, to jumping straight into the work with another woman. And adding that in with the children has probably been just the most profound growth that I've felt outside of the things we've been talking about, meditation and breath work and everything else.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a catalyst or an accelerant in that process, for sure. Because I think at a certain point I realized, okay, there is there's only not that there's only so much work that you can be done on yourself, because I think that that is an endless well as well, but I think that a part of the process or part of the work includes other people, whether that's a significant other or a child, or right now I'm just moved back into my parents' ADU. And so it's just an interesting dynamic, because it's like the first time that my whole family has been back under the roof, one roof, as now that we're all adults and there's two kids, two extra kids. It's just a really interesting dynamic being back. So for me, a lot of the things that I'm looking at is like, well, how can I use this opportunity to improve? Repair maybe is sort of a big word, because I don't know that I mean, maybe there's a little bit of repairing, but it's not like anything drastic. But like, how do I use this to really create not just okay relationships with my parents and with my family, but like incredible, amazing connections and relationships with them in a way that I had not prioritized in the past, and just thought that, whatever, but it's just, if nothing else, like that's what's present and that's what's opportune. And it seems like, in reflecting on it, okay, this is also what's supposed, like, not that's, I use that word loosely, but this is the project, or this is the mission, if you will.
I haven't lived with my parents for a while. I mean, I've gone back and forth even through adulthood, but anytime I go back to my hometown, or when I'm with them and I have a good relationship with them now, all that stuff that we think you've moved through, it comes back up and you get to work through it all over again. So, yeah, you have quite the project with you living with them, but it's also a beautiful opportunity to just make those relationships even better. And you kind of get to reestablish the script on that, because when you grow up a certain way, you're under their roof, you're doing what they tell you to do. You have to kind of come up with your own boundaries, and what are you willing to do, what are you not willing to do, where are you willing to go with it. But yeah, with my parents, again, it's just getting to reestablish a relationship with them that I did not have through a lot of my 30s because of where I was at. It's one of the most beautiful experiences that I've gotten to have, and knowing I'm good with my parents. If they I don't want them to pass, but if they do, I didn't leave a lot of stones unturned. Although there's still plenty of conversations that could be had.
Sure, I'm sure, and especially as you're going further into this parenting journey, as I know you've already been on it. Dodge, I got two questions left for you. The first is, if people want to get more connected with you, find out about what you're doing, what you're up to, where's the best place for people to go?
So you can come to my personal Instagram. I'm pretty active on that. It's just Dodge Feeler. I also have my business, which is telemedicine. We do a lot of different. We do hormones and peptides and a lot of holistic lifestyle changes. And that Instagram would be wait, no, I'm sorry. That's the website is wayolw.com, and then the Instagram is wayolwpm. But those are some easy ways to find me. I have a Substack, which is also just Dutch Feeler. I'm not as active on that. I only write articles when I have the time for it. And then I've also started my own podcast, which is the Way of Becoming, which that same thing can be found on Instagram.
Yeah, and yeah, I think it's important, as we're sort of talking about it, that one of the things that I appreciated, as I was looking into what you do, is that when I clicked on your website, it seemed like you brought a lot of the soul and heart and spirit into, you called it telemedicine or peptides or whatever. And that I think is a lot different than what's going on in that space. You can, I don't know. I don't want to say, like, there are a lot of places you can get those things, and so if you can get it from someone that is heart centered, or is heart minded, I think I know it makes a difference in all the things that I pass through.
Well, the way it's come through, I had no choice. It did kind of start as a little of an anger project going through a divorce, and it's shifted over as I've healed. It's healed, so the vision's changed. And also, my podcast is actually the biology of becoming, not the way of becoming. But yeah, no, I appreciate the insight on the website. We're looking to change it up a little bit, just to give a little more clarity of what all we offer without taking the soul aspect of it.
Yeah. And we'll link all that up in the show notes and the podcast as well. Last question for you, Dodge. In your opinion, what is the definition of modern masculinity?
I think it's knowing when to be hard and when to be soft. When do you need to have the warrior out, and when do you need to be vulnerable with the people around you? Because we got a lot going where it's one extreme to the other. I mean, you can go deep into it, but it's just being a fully heart centered male that is here to better society, better humanity.